Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Wrestle Plug podcast. I am Aeron Nix. Now, joining me is a very special guest, our first ever masked wrestler, and somebody who has really taken the Scandinavian scene by storm. And if he hasn't yet, or if you're in Scandinavia and haven't seen him on the scene, well, you will do a lot more. I can assure you of that. And the incredibly talented Emeritus has joined me at the Wrestle Plug. Welcome, sir.
Thank you very much, man. Pleasure to be here. And a great intro.
Thank you. Yeah, I try and throw as much energy into it as possible. I've been doing over 500 of these, so I should have some kind of idea of what I'm doing at this point.
You got it down to a science, it seems like.
Pretty much, yeah. Still make mistakes, but obviously, as you'll understand as a video editor yourself, there are ways around it, but mostly it's uncut, it's uncensored.
Sure.
And we try our best to give the most candid and honest discussion here at the Wrestle Plug. Now, before we really delve in and I start asking you questions and things like that, a lot of people are going to be going, wow, who's this specimen? And, what's his deal? Emeritus, who is Emeritus? And ultimately, to particularly our American and British fan base, what do you bring to the table?
That's a good question. Good way to start. Who is Emeritus? Well, as a masked man, I am clearly very mysterious. Basically, I used to wrestle without a mask. Then you can see if you can try to figure out who that was. But I also do video editing. I also teach in Denmark wrestling. But Emeritus in particular was created as Denmark needed and Scandinavian needed masked wrestlers. So I took some inspirations. You might be able to tell some of these inspirations, including the name, which is somewhat a derivative of a band named Ghost. And thus Emeritus came into being and has been running rampant on the Scandinavian and a bit in Germany and a little bit in Britain wrestling scenes since about 2015.
You mentioned the fact that you teach wrestling. Do you own your own school in Denmark?
Well, I actually teach. It's basically it's BODYSLAM Pro Wrestling, which is a graps promotion. There's a school there, which is in association with OVW, the Al Snow Wrestling Academy, and the Danish brand of that and the branch of that is in Aarhus in Denmark. And I teach that one, which is sort of in conjunction with BODYSLAM, so it's sort of a mix between the two.
That comes highly regarded. Obviously, Al Snow's training schools are world renowned and found everywhere. I actually have a question relating to that, which may ruffle a few feathers, but at the same time, I feel as a trainer, I believe you'll be able to give me a good insight on it. But
try it.
Oh, absolutely. I do ask questions, honestly, but I am personally a huge fan of yours, so don't worry, there's no gotcha moments here. For me, and also it's something I'm also very excited because I'm somebody who is very much a beginner in terms of wrestling. I've been training for about a year and a half. Not very well, if I'm being honest. Terrible wrestler, but I try my best anyway. I think it's very important.
That's the most important part. Just trying your best.
Yeah, I do work incredibly hard at it, but on the few matches I have had, people would say it's pretty awful. So, but something I'm very much excited about. It's something I'm very excited about is the idea of hopefully coming over to Denmark and actually working for the school. And that's one of the reasons why I sort of clocked you as quick as I did, is because I'm not having you on just so I can curry favor for training, obviously. It may seem that way, but that's not the case. We can try our best, though. Fingers crossed for a booking. No, I'm kidding. But ultimately, it comes with a lot of responsibility. It comes with a lot of work. But obviously, like everybody, you would have started somewhere. But the quality of who you are as a wrestler, it's clearly evident because you wouldn't be training otherwise. And it's very evident from your style of training and from students that are coming from that school that there's an incredible amount of quality coming out of the Danish wrestling scene that, let's be honest, most people outside of Scandinavia will not be aware of. How did you get your start in the business?
Well, that's a long time ago, but if you remember on the internet, you might be old enough to remember that there was things such as AOL and AIM and MSN Messenger and all that. Oh yeah. There used to be like a bunch of wrestlers, and I used to be chatting them up on the internet because you could get to talk to Chris Hero and Chad Collier and American Kickboxer and all kinds of people. And a few of them, including American Kickboxer, actually would talk to me and actually tell me things and actually explain things to me when I was a kid. And then basically was told, hey, there's a school here in Detroit, the House of Truth, with Truth Martini, an American kickboxer, was teaching at the time. And when you're done with school, you can come here and live on my couch, and then you can go to a wrestling school. So basically, the week after I finished the equivalent of high school, I just took a plane to Detroit and lived on American Kickboxer's couch for 6 months and went to wrestling school. So I was trained by him and Truth Martini at the House of Truth, and wrestled a little bit, like, because it was Monday through Thursday that was training, and then usually Friday, Saturday, you'd go to shows, help set up the ring, maybe do a little bit of something before the show, but usually was just help set up and everything like that. We'd go to some shows, and yeah, that was basically where I started. So it's been a while at this point.
How was it, the first kind of transition, being a young man flying to a different country? Did you had much experience in terms of traveling going into that?
It was crazy because I was very much like, I'm from a very small town originally. So it was like just going there and just people I'd never met before, and just like as soon as I came off the plane and he picked me up, we went right to the wrestling school. So I had no time to adjust. It was just, okay, now we're doing tons of burpees and push-ups and everything. And it was just like, okay. And I was sort of used as a good little mix of like encouraging everyone else at the school, because you could tell like I was doing it, and he was like, this guy just came right off the plane, so you can't complain, the rest of you. But yeah, it was a crazy transition because I had never done anything like that before. Of course, I had been prepared in the sense that even like, make sure you get in shape, make sure you do these things, eat right, everything. But it's not the same as starting wrestling, and you're intimidated, and it's scary, and it's people you've never met, and a new environment. But at the same time, the reason I felt like I wanted to do it that way was also that I knew that if I had made sure that I bought a plane ticket for 6 months later, it was like, well, now I'm locked in. I'm here for 6 months either way. So it'll have to go really badly for me to quit, because I'm here. I'm kind of stuck here. So I think it was a good way to sort of push myself to not be too intimidated and not give up on it that easily, because otherwise I think a wrestling can very easily be very intimidating in the beginning. At least that's what I try to avoid having when I teach people. But it's very hard to avoid either way, because it's so physical and it's things you've never done before. But yeah, that was kind of why I did it.
Yeah, the anxiety, actually, people don't realize how difficult that can be for people who may have mental health difficulties, or even people who are just can be a little bit faint of heart. There's nothing wrong with that. And actually, a good wrestling school and good wrestling trainers will teach you how to cope with it. And ultimately, wrestling will it won't knock it out of you, but it will certainly help condition you. And like you say, I think that's a really good way of handling anxiety. If you're scared of something, or just handling a fear or a phobia, book the ticket, then you've got no choice but to do it. That was the same with me. It was like, well, I've paid my money to go training, so tough tits, get in there and see what you can do. And, if you're rubbish, at least you've given it the respect that it deserves by trying it properly and trying your hardest. How long were you based in America for before you decided to come home?
Well, I was there for the 6 months, and then I went right back home because that was kind of when my tourist visa ran out. So I was there from like literally the beginning to the end of that tourist visa. Then I went home for about a year, did some shows, did a little bit in Germany, did some stuff in Denmark. Then I went back there for a couple of months and did a couple of shows, everything else like in the Ohio, Michigan, Kentucky area. Then since then I've been in Europe the entire time. So I've been there a couple of times, but again, it was more just because I knew people there. It was not so much because I was thinking I want to be a wrestler in the United States. I think the entire time I've always been thinking that I want to help bring it more to a Danish audience, or at least a Scandinavian audience, rather than just try to get in where it's already hot. And that's sort of been my thing the whole time, because the Scandinavian scene, or at least the Danish scene, was not very strong when I went there. Like, I was the second guy that ever been to a wrestling school, and there was a bit of a wrestling scene, but like properly trained. So in that sense, it's come a long way since then, because now we're actually teaching people here ourselves. So I've always kind of wanted to build the scene, much like British wrestling has been built up a lot over the past like 10 years. again, like rebuilding it. So that's more been my focus, I'd say.
Yeah, even myself, somebody who is so obsessed with wrestling, very encyclopedic in terms of what I know of wrestling that's in front of me. Even I don't know very much about Denmark as a wrestling culture. I've been to Denmark. It's a beautiful, beautiful country, but it's not something that I ever really associated with wrestling. Is it safe to say that you're, in some ways, I'm sure you're very humble about the subject, but in some ways you must be a pioneer of the independent wrestling scene with the current state that it's in Denmark?
I'd say that at least BODYSLAM, the brand is, because before that there was some wrestling, but like again, like we talked a little bit before the podcast started about like video editing, graphics, all that kind of stuff. Like that has really been stepped up, and like the whole presentation of the wrestlers and just the quality of the wrestling has improved so much that now it seems more like people from other places are noticing it and are thinking that, hey, this is like a hidden gem of sorts. At least it's like a diamond in the rough of sorts. That it's not as polished, of course, as like the American scene or the Japanese scene or the British scene or anything like that. But it's a place where people are realizing there's some talent here, and there's some looks, and there's some characters, and the production is cool. And I think people have not noticed because there really wasn't anything to notice before. So I guess you could say it's pioneering in that, in the same way I would say, much like the British scene, but on a smaller scale, that BritRest kind of became this thing. Like in a couple of years, it turned into like, holy crap, there's a huge scene here, and the people are really good, and then it became a global thing. And that's definitely what we're trying to do. And it's of course hard because it's such a small scene and such a small country, but that's why we're also trying to work together with like WXW and some of the Swedish promotions, like trying to make it more of a like a brand thing where it's not just like we're isolated here. It's better to sort of reach out and like try to get some of our guys other places, and also try to get some of that talent to come to Denmark and learn from that.
Yeah, I always say that unity will strengthen over division. Pretty obvious, but you'd be amazed how many people have lost that lesson in translation. Obviously, mentioning names like WXW and things like that, and you've mentioned our BritRest scene, we're very spoiled to have the scene we do. However, the pandemic comes in, makes things very difficult. How has it been trying to adjust to that? Because obviously, you know, by your own admission, your scene is still trying to build that notoriety that something like our scene already has. We had an infrastructure in place. We've even got a WWE brand in NXT UK, which, you know, despite the moniker, is available for a large amount of European wrestling, actually. And I would probably hazard a guess to say that it won't be that long before Scandinavian wrestlers find themselves on that brand, because I believe in the quality of your wrestling. And from everything I've been able to source, the joys of having access to YouTube and the internet now makes the consumption of wrestling so easy, and BODYSLAM is so professionally, it's just shown in such a professional light, and it is displayed in a very professional manner, and it's so easy to consume because of that, and obviously down to your work as well as other guys and women who are involved in that brand. What was the pandemic like? Has it brought has things been at a standstill? Has it taken it back slightly? Or is it a case of we're still ready to go and we can still roll out shows when needed?
I'd say it's been a mixed bag. Like I think it's been in a lot of places, in that there was a while in the beginning, the first lockdown, we could kind of train a little bit, but not really, small groups. Then we were actually able to run shows from the summer until November of last year. So we had like a bunch of shows. Then from December till now, there's nothing. There's been no training. There's been no shows. And hopefully things are starting to change in April. We're hopefully able to run a show in May. There's one scheduled for May 22nd. So if all things go well, that one will be able to be run with some restrictions in place, of course, like social distancing. People have to be seated, like with some room between them and everything like that. But I would say in other positive ways, I would say it has probably brought out something extra on those shows from the Danish wrestlers, because we couldn't bring in any foreign talent. So it was like, this whole show is now like, it can only be Danish wrestlers. So everyone has to step up a little bit, and everybody felt like this is a chance to step up an extra level, because we can't rely on, hey, we got Chuck Mambo and TK Cooper coming in, and they're going to have a great match with us because, like, as long as we just live up to them, they know what they're doing to that level. Now it's like it's Danish people versus Danish people in all the matches. So I feel like, and again, storytelling wise, storyline wise, like having to revisit some of that and try to change some things up has also helped. Like being able to do that on the fly, like because we can't do what we wanted to do in every scenario. So I would say in that sense, it's probably made some people step up, but it's also, of course, been a big step down that you haven't been able to train and just not been able to run shows, which again, we were doing sellouts in some of the venues, and now who knows what's going to happen once everything opens up again. But I think that's an issue all over the world for like no matter where you are.
Yeah, even our infrastructure's been hit, despite the size of it. Obviously, we've unfortunately had other things that have also derailed the credibility and the reputation of our wrestling organization, unfortunately. You know, something that I've spoken ad lib about on this podcast. Just the sheer idea of international wrestling is so exciting to me. My dream is to commentate for different brands and to lend my voice and my podcast and my design and things like that to different, you know, my dream truly is to go to places like Denmark and then more of us, because I don't believe that I'm ever going to be truly talented enough as a physical specimen to work shows like that. Although I could work ring crew and things like that, not a problem. But, and to me, that in itself is such a massive joy. You know, even somebody like me, I got to work a progress show as part of ring crew, and that was honestly hands down probably cooler than any wrestling match I've had. Just the fun that I had.
You kind of have to enjoy that aspect of wrestling as well, I think.
Yeah, like, I think so.
Otherwise, I don't think you're going to like wrestling.
Yeah, I'm fascinated by the technicalities of everything that goes into a wrestling show because, like yourself, I'm a designer, I'm a videographer, I'm a graphic designer in so many different ways. So for me, I'm really fascinated by the all-encompassing business, not just the bumps of things. And some people might say, yeah, that's because you're terrible at taking bumps. It's like, I fully agree. No, when you're my size, you don't want to take bumps. No 6'4" man wants to take bumps. But, you know, that's just the way it is. You have to learn with everybody else. So obviously you know you got to train with Truth Martini, which is a big name in America. People don't realize just how special he is. What a fantastic promo, a real great understanding of psychology and the business. A guy who, you know, obviously the House of Truth in Ring of Honor and being the brains behind Jay Lethal's title run in Ring of Honor, and also lending himself backstage and, you know, kayfabe excluded from all of that. You come back to Denmark, you obviously start plying your trade and things like that. Now, obviously, you're wearing a mask, but like you said, you know, and you've sort of lent a little bit of knowledge to me in saying that you weren't always a masked wrestler. What kind of precipitated your opportunities to then start wearing a mask? Was it very much a case of, I want to bring that tradition into Scandinavian wrestling more? Or is it just simply a case of, I look pretty badass, so I'm going to stick a mask on?
I'd say it was more number one than number two. It was more that I felt like character. Again, I feel like the main thing, and we also preach that to a lot of guys here, is like, gotta have nice gear, gotta have a gimmick, gotta have something. Because again, if it's a very like smart mark audience, they will respect anything almost. Like you can look a lot alike, and people are still gonna, as long as the quality is there, they're gonna love it. But with Danish fans, because there isn't a huge scene here and wrestling hasn't been on television since like 93, people don't really know what it is, and they have like some preconceived notions, and you have to live up to some of it, which is like characters. They might see a mask, they might see guys with cool looking gear, cool looking entrance jackets, like very gimmicky stuff. But of course, then when you add the layer of actual like work rate to it, where it's like they also have cool matches, so then you get both best of both worlds, and like the kids will like it. People who want those wacky characters or like interesting looks, they're going to be more inclined to watch it if they see a poster of that than if they see a poster of 5 good athletes looking like they're going to have a fight, because that's not what people in Denmark would associate with wrestling. They would think, oh, Hulk Hogan or Ultimate Warrior or something like that. So I think it's been very important for the growth and being able to have sellout shows that there's more characters and that there's more gimmicky stuff involved with the improved wrestling that has also taken place. So it was more that than it was to do with, hey, I look pretty badass in the match, because I also look pretty badass without.
Yeah, no, you won't get any argument from me, to be honest. And even if you did, you probably slap my face in. So I wouldn't argue in that regard. Yeah, exactly. I've seen how you guys train, and rightfully so, to be honest. It's a physical sport. The obviously the mask is on and everything that comes with the character and stuff like that. Is it inspired in some ways? But for instance, you mentioned stereotypes, and I thought that was quite interesting because obviously, like you say, a very bare bones wrestling audience would expect a certain degree of stereotypes. They'll see a guy with a mask, for instance, and they might think, you know, for instance, my mum is always a really good measuring stick for me because my mum hates wrestling, but she has some preconceived notions of wrestling. So she sees a mask and she assumes, oh, they must do flippy stuff. Do you find that people are expecting more of that kind of style of wrestling from you because of your appearance, or is it because of obviously your experience? Do you have an opportunity to kind of stamp your own approval, stamp your own identity on what you're doing?
I think I'm lucky that I am tall and relatively big enough that people don't expect it. That they don't think that I'm going to be like that. I think some people, and again, because it's not so colorful in general, it is more gothic looking, or in that, like in that vein. I think people might more associate it with like having seen a guy like Sting or Undertaker or something like that. Like I've heard at shows when I've shown up and I've stood in a tag match, something, people yelling out, "Oh, do a tombstone" or something like that. So there is that, but I think it's more that people are leaning into than they're leaning into like flippy stuff. Because I think if people have seen masks, it's more just in pictures. They haven't seen actual wrestling. I don't think people know what a lucha libre would, what would change that from Japanese wrestling or from American style wrestling. They don't have that firm of a grasp of what wrestling is. They're just they just see the stereotypes of like there should be a guy with a mask like in Nacho Libre. There should be a guy in trunks with big muscles like Hulk Hogan. All this kind of stuff. So I don't think they have that deep of a knowledge. But I think if they did, then I would be in trouble.
How difficult has it been to cultivate a almost new blend of audience? Because over here, like even though the British wrestling scene took this incredible boom, British wrestling, what people don't realize is in the 60s and 70s, and particularly World of Sport and Giant Haystacks and things of that nature, that was regularly garnering 17 million people on TV, and that's back in the old. That's back in the old terrestrial days when there was 4 channels, you know. So, you know,
sold out
stadium. Yeah, exactly. The history of it has always been kind of, you know, interwoven in everything that we've done. And, you know, wrestling goes back so long, and it's still part of, you know, it very much developed itself from things like the circus and the carnivals and the traveling community and things of that nature, and found itself into a more mainstream populace. What's it like trying to cultivate that audience in Denmark? Have they been quite receptive, or has it taken a lot more work? Because over here, you kind of already have the groundwork, whereas you probably don't as much over there.
It's sometimes kind of interesting because people might expect, like wrestlers I'm talking, might expect what will get a reaction and what will get a great reaction and what they should do and what they need to do to get a reaction, because they've seen what people do in the US or in the UK or in Japan or wherever, and even where they worked. Like if they worked in the UK, then they know what the UK audience wants. And like then they realize, hey, this is a completely different type of audience. They might also react to that because they think it's like crazy stuff. But like I remember Chuck Mambo was very much excited that, hey, I can do the head, smash his head into a turnbuckle and then point to the other one and say, should I give him to that one as well? And everybody goes crazy. And he was like, that's amazing. If I do that in the UK, no one's going to say anything. They would roll, be like, no, shut up. And here they're just super excited. So now he's like, I want to do that every match. So in that sense, I think it's more that wrestlers sort of have to realize that you don't want to do too much. You still want to impress them, but you don't have to do as much to impress them. You should more focus on getting them involved than you should focus on impress, which is a little bit of a different sort of thing.
You mentioned Chuck Mambo and TK Cooper, 2 people who have been very influential actually in my like journey into wrestling, not just from training, but also like the podcast and that. They were former guests. Chuck Mambo's been on twice. Chuck's somebody who is actually considered a really good friend of mine. And I remember him saying that he was going to Denmark, and I remember seeing, you know, fleeting clips of this and thinking, oh, it's so fucking cool. Like the fact that somebody like Chuck could acquire the, you know, sort of, I don't know, the gravitas to be able to work in countries like that. It's kind of a double-edged question for me. So obviously, what was it like having guys like Chuck Mambo and TK Cooper, guys who are well recognized on this scene, working for you on that scene? But also, how was the perception from the Danish fans? Were they receptive of these guys? Did they have any knowledge of them? Or was it more a case of, you know, we are very sort of, shall we say, early doors wrestling fans who are just happy to consume whatever's here, and hey, how nice that these two British guys have come over to lend their craft and entertain us?
I think there might have been like 2 or 3 people in the audience that knew who they were, and one of them came from Germany to see them. So it's very specific. Like no one knows who they are, but they're very receptive to it, and especially when they get introduced and they hear from New Zealand or from the UK, it's like it gives that international flavor as well of like, oh, these aren't just local guys. There's like international talent here. And then of course it doesn't hurt that they look cool and they have a cool entrance, and like they quickly win the audience over just because they, again, the characters, which is, again, that's also the body slam thing. It's like guys like Chuck Mambo can more easily, or TK Cooper can more easily get booked just because they look very cool. Like they don't have to convince anyone. Like as soon as they show up, even if no one knows who they are, they're chanting Mambo or they're chanting Cooper because they hear the announcer say it, and then they're like, these guys are cool, we like them. And then as soon as they of course start wrestling and they're very talented, it's even better. And like by the end of that match, everyone was going crazy for them. So in that sense, I think it's super fun for them because they get to come in and impress, but it's not with that, like it's not with a disgust like, oh, who are these guys? It's more of a, we don't know who these guys are, but they look cool, so we are expecting this to be fun. So it's a very positive like vibe all around, in that no one seems to be like down on anyone just because they don't know who they are. They're very forgiving in that sense because they want to be entertained. They want to have a lot of fun, and they don't really want anything to be bad. They want it to be a great show. So that really helps.
Yeah, I see it from a positive light of, it would be great to, obviously you want to bring what you already can do to the table, but I imagine if you ask Chuck, he would say, you know, oh, it's very cool to be able to kind of form your own identity that you can use specifically in Denmark, because you'll be able to adapt your wrestling style and do certain things that, you know, like he said, aren't going to get over here. As a kind of aside, what would you say, if I had to press you, is the most difficult thing in Danish wrestling? What's the biggest hurdle that has come with trying to create such a great independent culture in Denmark?
That's a good question. The most difficult thing, I would say, just the mixture of being a very limited, like it's hard to get across like some sort of like invisible barrier in terms of crowd size, because again, you can't run the same city very often because there's like 4 or 5 cities that are big enough to really run that kind of capacity. But I would say finding a venue that's like a middle ground where it's like a little bit bigger but not too much bigger where it's going to look bad or where it's going to cost you a lot of money. I'd say a mixture of that and just the not having that talent pool to dive into, where it's like there isn't that deep of a talent pool. It's like there's some talented people, but it's not very deep. It's like you get a very shallow, like these are the guys, then there's a couple of extra guys, and you don't really have that like, oh, but we also have these 20 other people or 30 other people to pick from. Oh, this guy's gaining some traction. This guy's like, you have to really focus on trying to get the best out of the guys that you have, and really focus on like, okay, these guys are maybe this talented, or maybe what could we do to improve that? What does he have that the other guys don't have? So it helps in that sense that you it gives you that creative juice of trying to figure that out, but at the same time it's limiting in that you are forced to really focus on the people you have, whereas like in the UK you have so many great wrestlers that it's like a dime a dozen. You can just find great wrestlers, great talent, or new upcoming talent coming up all the time. And you can get a little envious of that, where it's like, oh, it'd be awesome if we had like 10 extra guys to like mix into this. But I think that's probably the biggest hurdle, the lack of, and that's also why we want to run the school, in that it would be great if we could get more talent, like homegrown people, like, oh, these guys are actually coming up, and like in 6 months these guys are going to be there, 6 months these guys are going to be there. But again, it's a very slow climb because there isn't that, oh, I want to be a WWE wrestler, or I want to go to Japan, or I want to do this stuff. They don't have that feeling like you might have in the UK now, especially with NXT UK now being so close, that it's like it's a very tangible goal for a UK wrestler.
Yeah, I was very curious actually in terms of, because obviously you would have seen a lot of incredible wrestlers come through your doors, you've training, you know, the current generation and the next generation of Scandinavian wrestlers. What's the influx like? Has there been a real boom in terms of excitement for it, or can it be difficult to get the numbers in? Because like you say, British wrestling, even if you don't know anything about like there are loads of yahoos over here, and you know, guys who are just taking the mick and claiming to be trainers, and they can open a school very easily because of the very shoddy professionalism that can be afforded in certain areas. That's something I've shot on quite a lot. And ultimately, you know, anyone can really, you know, be a trainer or lend whatever little knowledge they have to people over here, because wrestling is so well regarded and so popular, even in the more difficult times. However, I imagine in Denmark, Scandinavia, people are a lot more discerning, and also probably a little bit more wary of what wrestling entails. What's it like when it comes to numbers through the doors and, you know, the ability to train people? Do you find that it can be difficult to get enough in terms of talent, good enough talent to work shows and things of that nature? Or has it got to a point now where you feel comfortable and you can honestly say, yeah, we've got enough now that we can build our own culture?
I'd say the Danish scene has at this point grown enough that it's sort of self-sustainable. Like we can run shows with just Danish talent, and it doesn't feel like we're shortchanging the fans. It doesn't feel like if we had done that when we started out, I think we would have felt like, okay, this is kind of not really good enough. But now I feel like, yes, we have a great card and it's actually going to be really good. I'd still like some international flavor, but since you can't really do that right now, it's like this is good. And of course, you always want more and more people and more talent and newer talent, but I'd say it's still a struggle to get a lot of people. Like it's easier the last few years. There has been more new guys coming in, and like of course it sucks when you have to sort of shut down for like 3 months and then open up for a month or two and then shut down again. And like you don't know who's going to be left when you come back from that. Like who's going to be like, I still want to do this, and isn't just like, I gave up on it now. But I would say there has been some newer talent where it's growing, and it's still not to the point where you could just open a school and be like, hey, there's going to be guys through the door. You have to work for it and try to get those people to keep coming, and like give them incentives to keep coming back. We don't have that want to scare people away just to get their money type thing that you see some places where it's just it's that scam. Yeah, you know, the scammy types. Like we can't do that, and we couldn't afford to do that. Like we want to treat everyone well, even if we don't see necessarily, like I always have the feeling of like, if you want to do it and you tell me you want to do it, it's like, this is your chance. I'm not going to try to run you off. You can run yourself off, but I'm not going to be like, oh, I don't see anything in you, so I'm going to be like, I don't care. It's like, I want to give everyone a chance. If they show any sort of interest in it and they want to keep doing it, I don't care if it's going to take you 3 years to get good enough to be on shows. If you keep showing up, then I don't see any reason why you shouldn't become a wrestler. Whereas some people would say, no, that's wrong. You should get the greatest talents and the greatest whatever. It's like, but we can't afford that. And I would rather also just, if it's your dream and you want to do it, you should have the opportunity to.
Yeah, I love that mentality, and I appreciate you saying that, because I have gone to a lot of schools where they're like, you know, because I'm not a body guy, I'm a big person, 6'4", about 320 pounds, and people look at me and think he's got to be a wrestler, but I don't really have the big muscles and things of that nature. I work as hard as I can in the gym for it, but you know, there is very much a perception of, you're not a body guy, you're not going to make it, which is unfair, because one of my favorite wrestlers was Bam Bam Bigelow, and he was exceptional. I believe that hard work and, you know, a good ethic will get you there, even if it's just
body types. All body types should be in wrestling. That's how I look at it. Like I would want a big guy on the show. I'd want a small guy on the show. I'd want a super masked guy on the show. I want all kinds of people on the show so that every match could be a different flavor of ice cream.
Yeah. With no variety, the fans will very quickly tune out. And actually, for me, you know, we had Dirty Dave Dennis on recently, who is much more character based, you know, from his own admission. And even he said, "What's the point of having 6 matches on a 6-match card where every single one of them is, you know, 2 guys who look like a kid who can work 5 stars? If you've got nothing there, if you've got no entertainment value there, if you've just got purist wrestlers, particularly in a market like yours, I can imagine it might turn people off a little bit. Especially over here, you can get away with that a little bit because people love that purist stuff, and you can cater towards a more smart orientated audience. You know, the smart marks they will flock to stuff like that, and they will tolerate it. But even those people, they still love their nonsense. Otherwise you wouldn't have people like Bray Wyatt and, you know, guys of that nature who can do the funniest stuff. So
you want the character work as well as then, like, you want a brawl every once in a while, you want some weapon shots, you want a big bruiser, you want a technical match, you want all of it, but you don't want to just focus on one type, because then once you watch 3 or 4 of those in one show, you might be like, yeah, I can go to the bar and get some beers and I'm not really going to miss anything, because it's kind of the same. So you want to mix it up so they feel like everything is important in their own way.
Yeah, I mean, again, like, that's something you obviously have far more experience than me in, but I imagine that's something you learn when you're within a business, training, helping promote businesses and independent business, as opposed to just being a flat out wrestler. You have to look towards a greater understanding and broadened spectrum of what wrestling is. You can't just be like, cool, we've got great wrestlers, chuck them in a ring and they'll do the rest for you. Like, there's a lot that
that's not really going to work for very long. I think it might make for one good show if you just put it online and people are going to be like, that was a great show, but it's like, but are they going to show up for the next one in Denmark? Probably not.
People like storytelling, you know, they like all these different things that go with it. And I'd like to think I've been in and around it enough now to know and understand enough that, and respect the business enough to think that, variety is very crucial. And I'm very lucky. I get to speak to all kinds of people. And again, that's kind of what had me looking to have you on the podcast, was the fact that you were going to offer a much more refreshing and interesting take on wrestling. Now, you personally, by your own admission, you consider yourself to be an older wrestler, a veteran of sorts, and obviously you're very well delved into the sort of the training side of things, you know, the backstage stuff and everything that comes with it. Would you say that that's more of a priority for you now? Do you still feel like there's a lot of passion and a lot of kind of need to continue to, because you still look $1 million, you know, you still look like you're ready to go, you can still work to such an astonishing pace. You know, how long would you say that you feel personally you have left before you would like to transition further away from working in ring to outside of it?
I mean, I started relatively young, so I'm still I'd say I'm probably not in some people's minds young, but I'm still relatively young. But I would also say I'm feeling great physically, so I don't. And again, I want to be the type of guy who keeps wrestling. Like, if I don't get any injuries, I want to just keep going forever. Like, I don't see any stopping point where I'm like, I don't want to wrestle anymore. I just love wrestling so much that I couldn't imagine not doing it, unless it's because I'm physically not capable of doing it. And for now, I'm feeling great, so I think I could keep going. And I would also say that I also try to mix things up and like change things, and I keep coming up with new things, like, doing a babyface thing soon, hopefully. So I'll be like, okay, I need to come up with some new ideas, new ways of doing things, some new ways to mix this character up. So I love doing that as well, like coming up with new ideas, both for myself and like other guys that are at the school who are on shows but are still coming to train. I still love coming up with ideas for them, and like, what could they do, what could be cool for them. So I think I love wrestling enough that I like doing it for myself, but I also like doing it for everyone else, and just seeing the show as a whole succeeding, where it's like, oh, they did great, and that thing that we talked about and we came up with was really awesome and people loved it. So I would say I don't think I'm going to ever transition completely. That's also the thing about a mask or face paint. You can just keep looking kind of like you're never aged the same way. So I would say I don't think I'm going to transition necessarily, but I want to keep doing all of it. I want to keep doing the behind the scenes. I want to keep doing storyline stuff. I want to keep writing stuff for it. I want to keep doing videos. I want to keep helping people out, getting better. And I love that as well. Like I get as much enjoyment out of seeing other guys coming up with something or figuring something out, or some idea I came up with, and then them incorporating into their own thing. So I just love all aspects of wrestling, I think. At least all the positive ones, not all the behind the scenes weird stuff.
Yeah, I get a real sense of positive. I'm very infectious, actually. It makes me very excited as a beginner to get out to Denmark, maybe do a weekend course or anything like that. I would be thrilled to come and visit and, you know, apply as much effort as I can into it, just for the experience more than anything else. And I would honestly recommend anyone else does so as well, whether you're a complete scratch beginner or, you know, there's a lot of guys. I'm very lucky. I've trained with guys who have been working for, you know, nigh on 20 years, really good wrestlers who I know would love to come out and work that kind of thing. And that's the advantage of this podcast. You've probably noticed from the brands that I'm trying to cultivate, it's very much about the wrestling. It's not about me or making money or, you know, any kind of, I don't care about notoriety. I really care about the business, and I'm very passionate about it, and I want it to succeed. And that's despite everything that's gone on. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention it. I know you said that you're OVW affiliated. I don't know if you've seen recently, there was it happened some time ago, but there was an issue involved where a trainer had taken advantage of one of the individuals that he was training in a main event match at a company called Fight Star. Jay Knox was the wrestler involved. He unfortunately caused some very traumatic injuries. Obviously, you know, I don't need you to come on and say that's a very bad person, because we all know that it's fucking stupid what happened. But I'd like to know from your perspective as a trainer, like, how disappointing is that to see something like that, particularly as he is, I think it's personally a joke that he is a British version of you, because it's very evident that you are 10,000 times the individual he will ever be. And I don't mince words, frankly. If he tried that nonsense with me, might have had a different story. But ultimately, you know, I'm just disappointed, because I feel like wrestling, particularly in this country, doesn't really need any more bad press. And we're working so hard. And there's so many good people who work so hard, like yourself, all around the world, to make wrestling a fun and safe environment. What was your thoughts seeing that? That must have been incredibly difficult and also incredibly frustrating.
I mean, it's just always, whenever I see, like, there's a lot of that old school stuff that doesn't really fit anymore, in my opinion. And it's like, you're not going to convince, like, if you blow a spot or something looks bad, it's like, move on. Or if you want to give a receipt and stuff like that, it's like, people at the show, no, it's not real. They buy into it during the show. It's like watching a TV show. It's like watching a movie. They accept it for what it is, but don't act like it's real. So whenever I see stuff like that, or people getting upset by blown spots, and like, now I'm gonna save it by beating the shit out of you, it's like, don't do it. Like, that's not what this is about, and no one enjoys seeing it. And you're just, and again, he was his trainer as well, which is just even worse, because like, now you're setting the example that that's apparently okay. I think he got jail time at least, but I think we all realize, like, he's a bad person. But again, it's this old veteran mentality of like beating up the young kids, like teaching them the business that way. I don't agree with that at all. It's just, it's retarded, in my opinion. That's a bad word. I'm sorry.
Oh, that's all right. I mean, that's fair enough. I mean, it's warranted in this scenario.
It's bad. It's just, when you put your life in someone else's hands, and it's entertainment, and everyone knows it's entertainment. So don't take advantage of it. Don't be like, oh, I've been wrestling for 10 years, and you've been wrestling for 6 months, so I'm just gonna beat you up. What's that gonna teach him? Like, we're working together here. We're trying to tell a story, and you'd rather work super light with him, so that he realizes, oh, you can actually make things look good, get a great reaction, if you just have the psychology behind it, and you make things look good, but you don't have to touch me barely. Like, that makes way more sense. And it's just these old-timey guys that are still around sometimes, where you just think, you should just quit. You're just like, you're not a benefit to this anymore.
Yeah, no, it's refreshing to hear that. I found it very disappointing because OVW is a very famous and professional name. And now all of a sudden, you know, I'm sure I would like to think, especially, and obviously the reason I asked that question is because I want people to know that someone like yourself, for instance, if people are thinking from further afield, oh, I'd like to go and train with Emeritus in Denmark and stuff like that, that they don't have to worry that that's the kind of behavior that's going to be reflected upon them. Even at some of the tougher training schools like Rev Pro, for instance, which is where I started, there's still, you know, I personally think they treated me very well, and there was nothing like that. There's definitely guys who will be like, "That was shit, do it again," which is fine. I have no problem with that.
That's just like that happens at every school.
Yeah, that's standard. That's par for the course. But you know, there's a way of handling yourself with professionalism. You want people to know that if they've done something wrong or it's not good enough, how to improve it, not to just be like, "You're crap, get out of the ring, don't come back," because that doesn't help anything and it doesn't cultivate the correct atmosphere. So, yeah, I just wanted to bring it up from that perspective, but it's not something that needs touching upon again.
It needs to have a bully atmosphere. I fear that bully atmosphere sometimes sneaking back in that used to be where it's like, oh, if you do this wrong, we're going to give you 20 chops or stuff like that. And okay, so you're not even doing the chop correctly. You're doing it like with an open hand without cupping your hand just to make him bruise up and just to injure him. Well, not injure him, but like hurt him. And it's like, how is that correlating with professional wrestling? You're not going to do that in a wrestling match. Like, sure, do some physical exercise. Like if you get blown up or you throw up from doing squats or doing push-ups, like, that's kind of like you're doing it from physical activity. It's not someone physically attacking you. Because that's how I sort of see that sort of stuff. Like it's kind of assault in a way. So I don't agree with anything like that.
Yeah, especially in this day and age as well, people have to be very careful because, like we've seen, like the only thing that really gave me comfort from that was the fact that actually the justice system did what it did. Because, like you say, it is assault and it doesn't fall under the bracket of wrestling training. And you know, I've seen some people using it as an excuse to be like, the business is going soft. No, it's a case of the business. The only place it's going soft in is allowing certain individuals the ability to train when they clearly don't have the correct temperament or professionalism to do it. So, you know,
if you want to do that sort of stuff, you can join an MMA club and have some fights.
Yeah, no, that's
then the
actually yeah, that's something that's kind of been levied towards me from people. They've said, like, you know, if you see anyone who's like that, you know, direct them towards an MMA school. That's where they can go if they truly want to get that kind of physicality. What we're trying to do is something different. It is physical. It can be violent at times, but ultimately it's an art, and it's an art that is shared and respected between both combatants or however many wrestlers are in the ring at that time. What's the kind of future growth for you in terms of Scandinavian wrestling? When you finally call it a day, many, many moons from now, what would you like to see within your own scene and everything that you've done such an incredible job of building? Is there an end game, a goal for you where you can say, this is what I pictured our scene being like?
I don't think I see an end game, but I do see like if we can get it to the point where people know what Danish wrestling is, and like Danish wrestling is, or at least Scandinavian wrestling is, like on par with like, oh, there's wrestling in the UK, there's wrestling in Germany, there's wrestling in Japan, there's wrestling in Scandinavia, where it's like it's sort of in that conversation of like it's a style of its own, or it's like an audience of its own. But if we can get it built to that level, which I think is just a matter of just keep grinding at it like it's been in every other area. It's just don't give up on it. Just keep going, keep getting better, keep training guys, keep like the next generation getting even better, the next generation getting even better, and like having more of a scene of like levels of talent. Like, oh, there's the veterans now there's some younger talent, now there's like super rookies. Like once you get to that point where it's like there's an ecosystem of it. And of course, I would love bigger crowds. Like we can usually draw like 400 or 500 people, but it would be nice to be able to go 700 or 800 and have that be the norm, like you've seen in like OTT or places like that, or like they do even bigger. They do 1800, I think. But I see a cap of some sort, but I would still love that cap to sort of keep improving, like to the point where it's like a point where I would love to see it to the point where it's like I didn't think that was going to happen. Like I would say 1500 would be that would be a crazy amount of fans at one show.
Yeah, is there kind of like a show in particular? For instance, Progress is somebody I use as a good example. You're probably very aware of who Progress are. Like, you know, when they started, I remember going to shows and, you know, you'd have 150, 200, and you consider that a good house. You know, for me, that's like, I've worked in front of a crowd that size once and I was like, wow, I've made it. No. But for me, like I had, because I'm so much older than the average person who started, for me, I was like, I just wanted, you know, any kind of achievement for me was an incredible achievement. So, you know, dream has been concluded and now I'm looking to other facets of the business. But Progress, for instance, you know, they did, are you probably aware of their hilarious names they have for every chapter? And, you know, they called one like, you know, we're going to need a bigger room again and things like that. And it got to a point where it got to a point where they started doing, you know, they even got a chance to do Wembley Arena. And it was, in some ways, I believe, the biggest audience I think they've had for an independent show in 30 years in European wrestling. And I think they had about 5,000, which is, you know, very, very impressive, to be honest. People will turn their nose, oh, you didn't sell it out. Oh, piss off.
You still got 5,000 people.
5,000 people. Like, WWE just get out for any of their house shows, so stop complaining. But is there like a grand thing there? Is there like a big hall? Because the one thing that I recognized from my time traveling and seeing Scandinavia was how beautiful the venues are. They're stunning. And you look at them and you just think, yes, like I'm one of these nerds who walks into a room or, you know, some kind of theater or museum and thinks, oh my God, imagine wrestling in here, the kind of, you know, the acoustics and everything that goes with it. Is there a venue in mind for you? Is there any particular dreams, any pie in the sky thoughts for you there where you think, yeah, this is something I've got to do? Or is it a case of just keep growing and, you know, not get too ahead of yourself?
I'd say it's both a case of keep growing, but there's also, I was at a Nick Cave concert once at the Royal Concert Arena, which is not that huge of a venue. I think it seats like 1,000, 1,200 people, but that's like a really beautiful venue, and it has a huge stage as well, like in the middle of the room with like audience on both sides. So when I was there, I was like, it would look pretty cool if there was a wrestling ring here, because there's like a balcony, there's everything. Like it would be like sort of that Progress show I think they did at a venue like that once as well, like a concert venue, where it's like it would look really cool. And it's not so much for the audience size, it's just I saw that venue live and I was in it and I was just like, I want to do a show here one day. So that's like, that would be like a pipe dream at some point.
The yeah, like I'm so excited, and one of the dreams for me is to, obviously, like I've said so many times and almost feel like I'm doing a sales pitch at this point. It must be boring, so feel free to tell me to be quiet. But like for me, I'm very much of, I want to be able to take Wrestle Plug all around the world, and particularly to places like Denmark, and, you know, have the opportunity to cover the shows, lend commentary, lend my talents, whatever I've got that's available, because everybody should be able to grow and enjoy themselves. And, you know, especially scenes like yourself, which have been built with such a great deal of honesty and respect, and, you know, BODYSLAM wrestling in particular, it just stands out to me. Immediately I watched it and thought, right, okay, how does this not have millions of views like someone else does? And ultimately, a lot of it can be luck at times and algorithms, as you'll probably know, and things of that nature. Like, for instance, I believe my content to be some of the best. I do, because what's the point of me doing it otherwise? I believe in what I do, and I believe that the presentation of what I have.
You should always strive for that, for sure. You should always strive to make it the best, because you shouldn't just be like, I'm fine with just this little thing being okay, because it doesn't have to be that good. It's not going to get a lot of views anyway. It's like, well, you should try to make it good anyway, because then the people who view it would probably be like, this is, like you said, like, thank you, but still, it's like you were like, this looks amazing. And if you don't try to make it look amazing, then why would even the 10 people who might watch it, why would they keep watching it?
Yeah, that's exactly how I look at it, in the sense of, do I want millions of people to watch Wrestle Plug? Yes. But for the 10, 15, 20 people, sometimes things blow up. We have 10,000 views on some videos, you know, but I love the fact that whatever video you watch of mine, whatever content, or if you even listen to it, you know that you're afforded a certain level of professionalism, of quality. And that's clearly something that you're very proud of, and you have applied so well to what you do at BODYSLAM. I do like to do word association. It's a little bit difficult because I don't know the Scandinavian scene as well. So before I break into it, obviously, one thing that I really want this interview or this conversation, because I don't really do the whole boring interview stuff. As you can tell, I like to talk as well.
That's good.
I think that's important. I think it's different, and ultimately that's what this brand is based upon. But one thing I really want to make a mission of with this is to further the knowledge for people listening and people watching who don't know anything about Scandinavian wrestling. So what's the easiest way for people to be able to consume your content, and also social media wise, and also there's going to be guys who watch this, a lot of trainees are really into our podcast, which I'm very grateful for, who are probably thinking, stick that on the bucket list, would love to go and train with Emeritus in Denmark. How is it possible for those guys to achieve those kind of goals?
Well, you can find BODYSLAM in a lot of places. You can find it on streaming services. You can find it on the WXW Now. You can find it on IWTV. You can find it on High Spots Wrestling Network. And as well as YouTube, as you mentioned before, as BODYSLAM Pro Wrestling, if you search for that. There's also Facebook, BODYSLAM Pro Wrestling. There's Twitter. I think it's BODYSLAM Pro Res, something like that. And then there's Instagram, which is Body Slammers, like a person would be a body slammer. So it's Body Slammers on Instagram. And you can find and contact any of those places. And you can also find me. I'm Emeritus. And I am also Emeritus Pro Wrestler on Facebook. And I think I'm Emeritus Wrestler or Emeritus Pro Res on Twitter. I can never remember my Twitter handle. And on Instagram, I am Emeritus Wrestler. So you can also find me or contact me or any of those fancy things. And you can also find, even though it's not been active since there hasn't been training for so long, but if you want to see some old clips and pictures, you can find OVW ASWA Denmark on Instagram and on Facebook, I believe, as well.
Yeah, all of those links will be available in the descriptions of the podcast, so don't panic.
And even if I misspoke, then you will find them.
Yes, absolutely. I can assure you they will be circulated to death now. You will not hear the end of us. And ultimately, it's important as well. I think that, every scene has the opportunity to grow. I want every scene to be on the same level. So it is and the fact that you've mentioned guys like WXW, who are so prestigious in how they present themselves. It's my personal favorite brand is WXW in terms of European wrestling.
Super nice guys. Like, they've been really helpful. Like, whenever we've had questions or we went down there to talk to them, like they've answered everything and they've helped us out. So, like, super shout out to Tassilo Jung and all the other guys. Super nice guys.
Yeah, one of the very first ever major interviews I did was with the Arrows of Hungary, who have lent their work to WXW. And I personally, I'm still astounded to this day that they're not the tag team in European wrestling.
Yeah,
amazed by their professionalism and their quality, and also just how cool they are. They're really cool people who are really worthy of your time. So yeah, like I say, we'll provide all those links and descriptions of the podcast, whether it be audio, it'll be in the descriptions for YouTube as well, ladies and gentlemen. So please do not hesitate to make sure you follow, and let's boost that algorithm a little bit and help these guys out as much as possible, because it all helps, even our tiny little audience.
Definitely. Anything and everything.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the most important thing in wrestling is for people to work together. More variety and less division creates more opportunities for everybody. And it means that even average schmoes like me can be afforded an opportunity to achieve even a small semblance of a dream. So, everybody, just work together. Stop being assholes, basically, is all I have to say on that one.
Stop being assholes. That's a good plug.
It's not that hard, is it? Progress has their don't be a dick, which is ironic because some of their fans can be quite dickish. It is what it is. But I've got no problem with people being honest and candid, and frankly, I don't mind ruffling feathers, but at the same time, I like to respect people, and I have a lot of respect for everything that you and everybody on that scene has done, and that will continue to be the case. I think we'll have you back if that's possible, especially when the Danish scene kicks back in. Something that I'm really excited about is, because obviously it's going to be a very different dynamic when you're back in full swing and doing shows, and hopefully you'll be lucky enough to see me lending my voice to the crowd later.
Yes.
Yeah, that'll be awesome too. But Before I go, I do like to do word association. I haven't got too many names because, like I say, I'm not as knowledgeable. This is now an opportunity for me to go away and learn more about Danish wrestlers, the Danish scene. But there are some names here. Feel free to... I like to say one word, but I won't hamstring you because in the wrestling business, it's very difficult to just have one word to associate with these names. So we'll start with some easy ones.
Try.
We can try. Chuck Mambo.
Sweetheart.
That is the most succinct and perfect word for him. He might be the nicest person in wrestling. I really believe that. And that. Although people hate wrestling, a lot of people do anyway, and there's a lot of self-hatred within wrestling. I think Chuck Mambo just brings a brightness to every room that I don't think too many people can do. Yeah. NXT UK champion Volta.
Amazingly good at getting a lot of stuff out on very little. Like, he's incredible.
Yeah.
And he wrestled Danish wrestler Tank once in Denmark.
How was that?
2008.
I bet
that was actually really good, even though it was a very young Walter at that point. But that was actually really good. Like, I remember that match. Like, that was right when I came back at some point, I think. And I remember watching them and being like, this might be one of the best matches I've seen in Denmark at that point. So I would say that was pretty good considering it's been so long.
Fingers crossed I've been able to somehow source some material for that and put it on the video, but that's depending on high spots as well. I don't want them hitting me with too many cease and desists. So it depends in that regard. But
I don't even know who would have the actual footage, though. I don't even know who would have it. I just remember watching it live. I don't even know if it was taken.
That's the thing that really breaks my heart a little bit, actually, on a quick tangent about wrestling, is some of the older stuff, you know, because I'm trying to source so much stuff, and actually there's so many things that wrestlers have told me, this match and you can't find it. And, you know, I've actually spoken to wrestlers. I had Laurie on recently, the German goddess. Like, you know, I don't have anything from when I was in Germany or France or Belgium because they were so adamant that kayfabe should be protected that they wouldn't even record the matches. So, you know, it's disappointing in a perspective, but then I suppose good for them at the time for being able to sell the product.
But it does when it happens. It's always like, I wish, that's why we tape everything. It's like, we want to make sure it's there, so at least it wasn't in vain. And someday people might look at it and be like, oh, that's really cool. I can actually go back and watch this. Yeah,
I mean, the WWE Network has proven that as well. Like, you know, they've got loads of stuff now where it's like, you know, hidden gems that you've never seen before because people love that stuff. And, you know, it's cool. Yeah, it's something that anybody wants. It's like, you know, knowing a band that nobody else knows, isn't it? Being a
it's like a niche thing, but it's still cool. Like, if I could find that Walter match, I'd probably watch it.
That's fair. That's absolutely fair. Ilya Dragunov.
He had that amazing match, but I actually sadly haven't watched too much with Ilya, and I've never met the guy. But that match with Walter they had in NXT is like they had apparently agreed to just beat the shit out of each other, and it was just amazing. Yeah. So I would say he's also an incredible talent. Like, he's a spitfire of a guy.
Do you know what? I've only met him once, and I cannot get over how nice he is. Like, he looks like he'll murder you. He's got that look of like a Russian sleeper cell agent. You think, oh my God, he's going to kill me. He's actually so unbelievably humble and kind and so generous with his time. He's a guy who, you know, I'm thrilled that he's on NXT UK. On the downside, it means that it's difficult for him to lend his talents elsewhere now because obviously they have a certain degree of perspective. But yeah, no, he's definitely somebody I watch extensively, and I recommend anyone does, to be honest. If my opinion's worth a shit, I would recommend anyone who's getting into the business check out his work, because the way he works and his facial selling is truly some of the best in the world. I believe that.
I remember he was really good by the end in WXW, because I remember I watched a few matches there, and he was really good right before he was signed.
Yeah, the crispness of it and the smoothness of it, and also it's actually quite rare. There isn't that much of a Russian scene. There aren't many because of obviously the way they handle their politics. It's difficult to get out of that system and work on the Western society, at least. Most of Russia's good wrestlers tend to be stuck or hamstrung in that system. You know, there's a few obviously that have broken out that people remember, like Kozlov, for instance, was a good example of that. But TK Cooper.
I met him a few times, and he's a super nice guy. Like again, and that's actually a very high praise because he's standing right next to Chuck Mambo, and he's still a super nice guy. So that's actually very impressive.
Whenever I stand next to Chuck Mambo, I always think, you're so much nicer than me. Go away. You're making me look bad. I'm a nice person. I think I'm a really sweet and kind person. I look at Chuck and I mean, there's something almost godly about you. It's actually too purist for me. I can't. It's
almost too pure.
Yeah, he is. He's too pure for this world.
He's too pure for this world. It's like, but like, and then again, the match I had with him and Chuck right before the lockdown, basically, that was just a great experience. And I wish I could work with both those guys again. They're just, I love both those guys. I'd love to wrestle them more because again, it was the first time we've ever wrestled at all, and it was a great match, and everyone loved it, and no one got hurt, and it was just like, we could do so much more. Is always what you think afterwards. Like now that we sort of got that groove, you want to sort of keep going, and then everything locked down. So it's like, that sucked.
Yeah, no, yeah, they haven't been snapped up by NXT yet, so fingers crossed you can have them back.
Which is like, I've been thinking that for a while. Like both of those guys, it's like,
it's like a ticking time bomb, isn't it? Because you want them to do well, but at the same time, you think, I want you guys to come over here and work again.
So. Yeah, I want to wrestle you guys more, but I also think you should get deserved more. So it's like,
by all means, more money, but not before I've had the opportunity to fulfill my dreams first, please. Don't be selfish.
Yeah, exactly.
That's kind of how it looks.
Don't step on my dreams, Mambo.
Exactly. Let me achieve mine first before you become a millionaire.
Son of a bitch.
Yeah, no, that's fair. Right. Interesting. What's your knowledge of old school British wrestling like?
Ooh, well, are we talking like Les Kellett and all those guys?
I'm so glad you
mentioned. I've watched the world of sport. I know the rules. I know Johnny Saint, but I think the main reason I know of all that is because I watched the reboot, and it was not like watching World of Sport. Not at all. Yeah. I prefer the old World of Sport, which is like, again, I think the only reason I really know about or got to know about all that stuff was because I was watching a lot of like American independence in the early 2000s, like IWA Mid-South and CCW, and Chris Hero and Colt Cabana and those guys were like super into British like old school stuff, like Johnny Saint, and went and visited him and all that, Rollerball Rocco and all that stuff. So it was sort of, they gave it a little bit of a revival, and Nigel McGuinness as well. And that's mainly why I know of it. And again, I'm blanking on a lot of names here, but like I've watched my fair share of World of Sports, and it's a very specific style, but it's also a very interesting style. I think it's very underrated nowadays in terms of how good a lot of those guys were.
Yeah, it's actually something that my minimalist. I've got a very minimalist style, I suppose. I can do some crazy stuff if you want, but I quite like the idea of very deliberate storytelling and very deliberate movements because of my size. I think it would be ridiculous for me to go out there and start throwing out Hurricane Runners and stuff. And frankly, I don't want to spike myself. That's not my style.
Yeah, that's not a good idea.
No, and obviously, Giant Haystacks is quite important to me because he was friends with my grandfather. So for me, it's like, so for me, I kind of look at that style and I think, obviously, I'm not as big as that, God forbidding, but at the same time,
I want to be that big.
No, like, don't get me wrong, he carried it very well, but I don't think it would be healthy for me to balloon in size anymore in lockdown, to be honest.
Long-term health, it's not a good idea.
Yeah, no, I'm dreading like any kind of conditioning when we come out of lockdown because I'm just going to be gassed after literally one squat, and I used to be able to do 100 squats, no problem, so better get working at it. I'll go with... Actually, do you know what? We'll lean towards the names that you will know well. Colt Cabana.
Colt Cabana, he was a childhood favorite.
Really?
But if he heard that, he would probably feel even older than he is. But I remember watching him in IWA Mid-South, and I thought he was cool already when he came out to Copacabana, and it was him and CM Punk and Chris Hero and all those guys, Ace Steel. All those guys were just, that was like my introduction to wrestling outside of WCW, booked during the Vince Russo era.
Yeah, less said about that, the better.
Yeah, that's not good.
Yeah. Truth Martini.
he's a character. Like I don't even know what to say other than he's a character. He's got the most raspy cigarette voice, and he like I'd say some of his character traits are also his real life traits.
I get that
But
distinct
again,
impression.
yeah.
Yeah, I listened to him on the Art of Wrestling, Cock Cabanas podcast, and I remember him talking about hiding in a boot for customs and things like that. I thought, you just strike me as the kind of person that would do that. Like, nothing, more power to you. But yeah,
exactly like you would imagine. Exactly like you would imagine.
What was he like learning under him? I imagine he was able to teach you a lot more about the business and just, learning. Like, I imagine he was very good at teaching you about the, shall we say, the more less involved elements of wrestling and how to, carry yourself and avoid certain situations and things of that nature.
I'd say the main thing, like, of course, wrestling school is what it is. It's you learn the bumps, you do the same international. You do all the basic spots a million times. You take a hip toss a million times. You take a backdrop a million times. Everything a million times. But besides that, I would say my main influence over what I learned was basically the fact that I was lucky enough that I lived with American kickboxer, who was also the trainer. So, like, it was almost 24/7, like wrestling. Like I think I learned more just from the fact that I was living with him, and like whenever wrestlers would come over and hang out, and like, here's a bunch of guys coming over. Now we're gonna talk to them, and like, here's Paul Payne. He's gonna hang out a couple of days. And then we'd sit there and watch old AWA matches, and he'd like, oh, you can call this match, or like, how would they call this match? Like Flair Steamboat, like when are they calling stuff? And like, when are they talking? When are they doing this? What did they call here? So I'd say I learned more. Like, of course, I learned at the school, like all the basic wrestling stuff, but I would say everything around it was when I really learned wrestling, which is like, to someone who's never been to a wrestling school, they might think it's just a bunch of moves that you're just like learning the moves. So like, oh, did you learn any cool moves? It's like, you don't really learn that many moves at wrestling school. You learn the basics and how to take the basic bumps, but besides that, it's basically a free-for-all of figuring out what moves you want to do and how you're going to put them together. So I would say all of that stuff and all the psychology and everything came from American Kickboxer and hanging out with him all the time, and all the other wrestlers that he hung around with, like getting to go on road trips and to shows and all that kind of stuff.
Cool. I have one more name left. Before I do, just as a very quick aside, a question I thought was worth asking: has there been any kind of continued communication with Truth Martini or American Kickboxer? Maybe the opportunity to bring them out to Denmark.
We haven't had that, no. But again, American Kickboxer is not really wrestling anymore. He's out of the business. But Truth Martini, I haven't talked that much with really since. So no, there hasn't really been that talk.
He's
and again, I think
quite a bit.
Yeah, he's not. He's involved with. He's still got the school, but he's not as involved as he once was. And again, he had a broken neck already at that point. Yeah. Like I think it's not better at this point. And I think there's also the whole thing where I think the European scene is still very much European. I think Americans have a harder time seeing anything besides the British wrestling unless they specifically go here. So there isn't that sort of connection the same way as like British wrestling might have with Scandinavia, because it feels very close. It feels like it's right around the corner. Whereas for Americans, it's like, that's a long trip, guys. It's like,
yeah,
it feels very far away because it is very far away.
Yeah, it is. It's a long way away. So that's why I'm always amazed when we get guys like Eddie Kingston coming over and things, because I just think, wow.
Sure.
Yeah, we're very lucky. He's like probably my dream opponent to me. He's the style that I look to replicate most. I love his style.
Is also amazing.
I love the idea of being safe, but also making it look like I'm genuinely a real fighter. Because I don't know.
Eddie Kingston will make you believe. That's for sure.
Yeah, I just love his physicality, and that's something I aspire to be. If someone's yelled at me and forced me in a corner and said, who do you want to most be like if you had to replicate your style? It's Eddie Kingston, definitely. Yeah, one more name, sir. One more name. You don't have to give one word for this one. Emeritus.
That's me.
You.
It is me. Well, I would say I am. I'd say Emeritus is still on his way up. I hope. I'd say I felt a little bit more of that sparkle for that when we did the WXW show, literally on the weekend where everything shut down in Europe. Like I felt like we're on a roll here. We're starting something here. It's like we're gonna start doing more. We're gonna get to do more. I've been doing a lot of shows in Sweden lately. We've been doing more BODYSLAM shows. Now the WXW thing, it was starting to feel like we're getting on a bit of a roll, and then it's gone. So I would say once everything clears up, hopefully we'll be seeing more Emeritus in more places.
Yeah. I think in my time and my experience of talking to you today, I would probably use the word trailblazer. So think of that what you may.
Well, I'll take it. I'll take it, even if I don't agree.
Yeah, well, one thing I'm very proud of, even in this conversation, is knowing that you have put so much time and effort into expanding what wrestling is and showing people how to do it the right way as well. So thank you very much for your time, sir. I'm looking forward to having you back on, hopefully to chat more about the growth of the industry and particularly the growth of it in Scandinavia. And ultimately, when shows resume as well, it'd be a great opportunity for you to come back on and hype that stuff. We'll continue to do so from afar at a Wrestle Plug. You're welcome to contact us anytime if you want anything promoted. So
awesome, man. Thank you very much.
No, it's honestly been a pleasure. Thank you very much for your time. Like I say, we will absolutely, well, I will personally, I don't know why I keep saying we, like there's anyone else who puts any work in here.
It's the royal we.
Yeah, it's exactly. It's kind of like an all-encompassing thing. We're a big family here. One person, but it's a big family. I mean, big family. But yeah, no, as far as things go, obviously, I really look forward to having you back, man. But thank you very much for coming on the Wrestle Plug and being so humble with your time. It means the absolute world to me.
You're very welcome.
Thank you very much, sir.